Is it difficult to track costs by client when those costs are prepaid? Well, don't worry. This video will show you how you can allocate costs to the proper client. If you have any questions about this topic, you can leave them in the comments section below and I'll do my best to help you. And of course, if you feel the video helped you, I hope you will click like and don't forget to subscribe to get updates on new videos that come out all the time. We don't always know which clients will need the resources that we pay for and record as expenses. In this case, if we pay client-related expenses before using them, that's what makes it challenging. At the moment we pay, we do not yet know which client the service or asset will be used for. We will know how much each prepaid resource is used for a particular client only at the moment the item is actually used. Most states require, however, that you apportion or allocate even the prepaid costs to your clients for what was used. So we have a very simple 5-step procedure that you should follow, and it will work if you're trying to allocate prepaid costs to the proper clients. First, when paying for the expense that will be used per client later, you must record the transaction with anything that physically identifies the resource with that particular purchase. For example, when purchasing office supplies for future use with clients, you must record into the transaction any unique identifying data on the box or container itself. This will be anything unique about the resources you are holding from in that specific purchase or payment. When you then use any of the resources that are paid for, like supplies, the associate attorney or the office administrator who's using the resource must immediately inform the bookkeeper what purchase these specific items came from. They should do this by looking at the unique identifying information on the container or made available by the bookkeeper. The bookkeeper must be informed exactly what prepaid resource was used, and most importantly, what purchase did the resource come from. For example, March 1, we paid Staples $1,000 with check number 3 for job supplies expense. We do not yet know which clients these expenses will be applied to. The box of the supplies was labeled with the date as well as packing slip number 8472-ST. So let's record this purchase from this information. Again, we are recording a prepaid expense, cost, or resource that we will later apportion to a client when we find out when we will use these expenses. So, March 1, we click New, and we go to Expenses. Make sure we choose March 1, and the vendor is Staples. And we're buying office supplies, so it's office supplies and software. Okay, let's use that as the expense. Now, the reference number is the most important. 8472-ST, that should go here. Actually, that's the transaction number that we excluded. That number should go in the description field as well as the memo. This way we know the box that has that label, the physical box of supplies that is written and has the label stapled 8472ST, those are the supplies that we are buying on March 1st. And the amount is $1,000. And we don't yet know which clients it belongs to, so we simply click Save and Close. And of course, the result is the same like paying any other expense, and it shows up as a general $1,000 supplies expense in the trial balance. Now, here's where it gets interesting. On March 3rd, an associate lawyer used $150 of these supplies, the supplies that we purchased on March 1 with that slip number, and they used it for Candy Charles. On the day that we physically use it, we edit the original transaction. We must reopen the March 1 recorded expense and allocate $150 of the $1,000 to Candy Charles's related job expense. Then we will look at the profit and loss by client, and you'll see only $150 of supplies expense will be listed under Candy. Watch how to do it. So we know which batch the supplies were taken from, so we have to record that they were used on March 3rd. We can double-click the expense to get a list of transactions that added up to the expense. Right now there's only one, the March 3rd, that had this labeled on the box. So we double-click and open it up. And we have to do this. On the next line, okay, we still have to choose software supplies, office software supply, the same expense. And in the description field, we have to put who and when and why. You would put the associate attorney who used it and why they needed it. Now here's what you would do. You would first put that $150 goes to customer Candy Charles. Is that the right client? Yes, Candy Charles. However, you cannot change the amount that you paid. So what you would have to do is lower the original amount by $150. So now that it's March 3rd, see, 150 used by so-and-so for Candy. So the original amount you paid is still recorded as the correct amount that was taken from the bank account, but now it's $150 specifically for Candy, and the rest will be apportioned later. We click Save and Close. Now when we click Reports, Profit and Loss by Client, you can see Candy Charles has her profit decreased by $150 for the amount of software and supplies that we used on March 3rd. Let's do a second example. Let's imagine on March 7, we purchased $500 of stamps from the United States Post Office with the Cash and Chase Bank debit card. And they gave us that receipt that we taped to the box. Receipt number 1234. So let's go ahead and record the expense first. New expense. Okay. United States Post Office, coming from the bank account, March 7, and this is postage expense, and on the day that we buy it, we must include the slip number, whatever number is on the physical container, so we associate this March 7th payment with exactly those physical items. And the amount was $500. And this is what it looks like when you first record it. And when you click Save and Close, you don't yet know which client will use that postage or which client you're going to use the postage for. However, on March 10th, an office administrator needed to use $100 of those stamps from the purchase on March 7th with receipt number 1234567 for things that we needed to do to service this client, Betty Boop. After taking and using the stamps, you must reopen the March 7th recorded expense and allocate $100 of the $500 to Betty Boop's job-related expenses. So on the day that we use this, we can go back to the trial balance. You see, because the trial balance lists the total expense in general. So we double-click the expense that we're going to use and we get a list of every transaction in that expense account. Right now, the only one that's there is the one that we need. The one that we put this in the memo description field so that we can easily reopen it if we know that we took the stamps from this particular purchase. We go to the next line and choose the very same expense that we recorded when we purchased this. And then we put the when, the who, the why, and so forth. Needed for Betty, March 10. You have to put the date that you used it, put the amount that you used. Now notice up top, when you put the amount that you used, the total of the transaction will change. You're not allowed to have the total of the transaction changed because the original amount is what came from the bank account. So if you add 150 to the next line, you have to remove that amount from the original line. Then on the line of the amount that was used for the particular client, you put that client's name. So this is saying that on March 7th we bought $500 worth of supplies, and on March 10th we used 150 of those supplies specifically for Betty Boop. And now when we click Save and Close, we can go back to the profit and loss by client, and you can see the amount we earned for Betty, or the amount of profit for Betty, was decreased by the $150 of supplies that we just used.